something will turn up, I guess.
Any day now they're going to tear this place down. Any moment we will have been bulldozed right out of bed. How can you just sit there throwing those silly cards?
I like it. It's something I can understand. If I aim the card properly and throw it with sufficient force, it will land in the hat. See? It's something I can count on.
This is Talk Back. Our drama for this program is called The Little Ball Bounces. Our guest is Jameson Jones, Professor of Religion and Higher Education, Garrett Biblical Institute, Evanston, Illinois. Later, Miss Lisa Sergio and Mr. Merle Emery will be asking Mr. Jones questions raised by our play.
Right off, you'll probably ask, hasn't that big boob anything better to do with his time? The answer is no. Before you go jumping to any conclusions, I'm going to tell you what happened, and then maybe you can tell me what I should be doing that would be any better. It all started about 3 months ago, when we got our first television set. I came home from work in the evening, and they already had it set up in the living room. Well, mind you, I'm not saying the trouble started because we got the TV. That would just be superstition, and I'm not a superstitious man. All I'm saying is that the trouble started right after we got the set. No rational man would make any other connection between the two things. Would he?
It's wonderful, darling. But are you sure we can afford it?
Oh, I think so. You know that Babcock deal I've been working on?
Now can we turn it on? Just a minute, dear. Is that the site for the new factory?
Well, that's it. And I've managed to assemble a site that Mr. Anderson says is absolutely ideal for Babcock.
Isn't that wonderful? Now can we turn it on?
In a moment, Sonny. Not only that, he's so sure the Babcock people will go for it that he has practically assured me that I've earned a new position as Vice President of Anderson Real Estate Incorporated. Now, how do you like that?
I'm so proud of you, darling. And it's no more than you deserve after all the work you've put into it.
Well, thank you, dear. And what do you say, Sonny?
Now can we turn on the new television?
You may. Turn it on now. Takes a few moments to warm up.
You know the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to get in the spin the wheel contest. We're eligible now.
Isn't that the program where they spin a sort of roulette wheel and somebody gets a prize?
A prize? It's a fortune prize. Just for sending in his name and his address. What are you doing?
We may as well get one thing straight, Sonny. I don't want you entering any of those giveaway programs.
Gee whiz.
I've had one rule in my life, son, that has served me well. I've never asked for more than I've earned through honest effort. It's a rule you do well to follow.
But they're giving me all that stuff for nothing.
That's just the point, son. It's wrong of you to expect these people to give you something when you've done nothing to deserve it.
Gee whiz.
When you're older, you'll come to see I'm right.
Gee whiz.
When I arrived at work the following morning, my secretary told me that the boss wanted to see me. This was the morning after we got the TV, remember? Not that that had anything to do with it. You wanted to see me, Mr. Anderson?
Yes. About that promotion.
Yes, sir.
Adams, I'm a fair man.
Yes, sir.
That's why I hate to see this happen.
What, by promotion?
No, Mr. Snell's. He's going to be our new vice president.
Anthony Snell?
Yes, Babcock people decided to buy the parcel of land he's assembled.
I don't understand. I worked hard on that project.
No one works harder.
My parcel is better than Snell's. You said so yourself.
Better in every way. But it turns out that Snell's father-in-law has a friend who is in charge of plant location for Babcock Industries. So?
But that's not fair.
I know it's not fair. You won't mind moving into the smaller office, will you? Snell prefers yours.
Oh. All right. Mr. Anderson, what have I done to deserve this?
Yeah, that's the way the little ball bounces, you know.
I beg your pardon?
I said that's the way the little ball bounces. It's an expression.
Oh.
But I thought you said your plant site was better than Mr. Snell's.
It was! That's the whole miserable injustice of the thing. Can't you understand that?
Don't raise your voice, dear.
I have every reason in the world to raise my voice. It's a sad day when in my moment of trial, all my wife can say is, don't raise your voice, dear. And all my son can do is watch that silly TV set.
Not your moment of trial, dear. Don't exaggerate. You're such a bad break.
You never should have brought that thing into a deal was signed. I've never done anything like that before in my life.
What's that, dear?
I said I should never have bought that TV set.
What has that got to do with losing the vice presidency?
Nothing. I merely
Just
pointed...
superstition.
Oh, I know that. I merely said... Oh. Will you turn off that blasted contraption?
Well, my goodness. Gee whiz. Eric, your dinner will be cold.
I don't want any dinner. Thank you very much. That's when I first started throwing cards in the hat. I found it remarkably soothing in its own way. Sort of soothing. Well, anyway, it was a week later, and I was beginning to get over the whole thing when Alice and I went down to the town meeting. It was a big night for me. Awfully big.
Now for the vote. All those in favor of appropriating the necessary funds for Mr. Adams's road improvement program will so signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Well, congratulations, my boy. You really put it over.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the support of my committee the whole way.
Yes, I know, Adams, but as chairman, you're the one who deserves the credit. That's what makes it so rough.
Oh, nothing rough about it. I think it all worked out just fine.
Oh, yes, I forget. You didn't see the final draft of the road widening project, did you?
Oh, no, but I'm sure the
Well,
committee
you see,
would
we
have only...
found a way to widen South Street its entire length and only tear down one house.
Wonderful. Whose house are you going to have to... Whose house are you going to... Mine.
Yours, Adams. That's the way it worked out.
But, Mr. Mayor, I worked very hard on... I mean, does it seem fair that... What have I done to deserve this?
Well, that's the way the little ball bounces, my boy.
What?
I say that's the way the little...
ball bounces. The road widening project, my project, got underway with unprecedented speed. 1 month after the meeting, the equipment was working at the end of our street. They were closing in fast.
Eric, I thought you were out looking for a new house.
Oh, something will turn up, I guess.
Any day now they're going to tear this place down. Any moment we will have been bulldozed right out of bed. How can you just sit there throwing those silly cards?
I like it. It's something I can understand. If I aim the card properly and throw it with sufficient force, it will land in the hat. See? It's something I can count on.
Well, really, just because you got a couple of bad breaks, you don't have to... Darling, are you all right?
I believe I have a large hole in my head.
Oh, darling, you did get a nasty cut. I'll have to put a bandage on it.
Alice, what have I done to deserve this?
Well, nothing, dear. But you know what they say. That's...
Don't say it.
Well, I was just going to say, that's the way it goes.
Oh. But that's really the same thing, isn't it? I mean, that's the way it goes. Or the ball bounces, or the needle jumps, or the cookie crumbles,
Eric, are you sure you're all right?
or the lemon squirts. It's just a matter of breaks, balls.
What, dear?
I say it's just a matter of breaks, and locks, and little balls, or little lamps bouncing off your head. When you're just sitting there, what's the use? I mean, what's the use?
What's the use of what, dear?
Of anything! Of trying to do the right thing, or keeping your shoulder to the wheel, or
Dear, I can't hear the name of the winner.
your head to the ground. What?
The winner of the Spin the Wheel program. Are they going to announce that now, Sonny? Oh, I wanted to see that.
Alice, my head.
Well, just a minute there. Will you know what the winner gets? $100 a week for life, a trip to Bermuda, and all...
And here it is, folks. We've spun the wheel. The ball has come to rest, and here's the name of the lucky winner. The name is Mr. Eric Adams, 55 South Street, Batesville.
We won! Eric, we won! We win, Rich! $100 a week for life, $100 a week for life, $100 a week for life. And he has to sing some more.
And a big coat to Mrs. Adams, and a 500-piece set of electric train for Sonny Adams, and a lifetime supply of Response's wonderful toothpaste for the entire family. How about that? Congratulations, Mr. Adams of Batesville. You won a grand prize. And as we say around here, we spin the wheel, and that's the way the little ball bounces.
Don't go, Dad. We're celebrating. But what's wrong, darling?
You heard what the man said?
But we won. Everything's fine now.
Then he sent my name in, didn't he? I told him not to.
But $100 a week, Dad.
I know I don't blame you, son, but what have I done to deserve this?
Jones, this man seems to make no more sense out of good breaks than of bad ones. Can you explain that?
Well, I'm surprised at him.
You are?
Yes, I think his reaction is not at all as human as I would expect, because most of us are inconsistent in the way we react to good breaks and bad breaks. Most of us think, well, the good breaks are deserved. The bad breaks are what are undeserved. It's just a surprise to me to see him react equally poor to both of them.
Do you think most of us think that the good ones balance up the bad ones?
I think this is the way some of us respond to breaks, by saying they do balance. But I've known people who, it seemed, got more than their share of bad breaks, and others who seemed to get more than their share of good breaks. I don't think there's any clear answer.
Do you think that this man's reaction to the good break was because it was strictly luck, the turn of a wheel, and there was something inherently in him which opposed the idea of a game of chance? You remember he didn't want the child to see it in the first place.
Yes, this goes against his whole philosophy of life. His whole philosophy was, I do not want anything that I have not deserved honestly through hard work or through effort.
Well, what's wrong with having this philosophy upset if it turns out for the better?
If this had been the first thing that had happened to the man in the drama, he might have reacted differently. In this particular drama, it's coming after so much bad luck that I think really threw him.
Because some of the physical disasters, such as the lamp falling on his head and when he tips the rocking chair too much and he's thrown out of it, all this, I think, is to be explained by the fact that when you're overwrought nervously, then your physical nervous system doesn't react properly and you do slip and you do not measure your distances and so forth. But do you think he lacked a sense of measure in a more psychological or spiritual way, going off the deep end?
A sense of measure in perhaps that he could not get perspective as to what was going on. He could not understand. He followed things gradually down a line and then went too far and could not retrace or find himself again.
He got too mad, too violently mad in proportion to the thing itself.
I think this is because his whole system of life had been upset. He wanted everything to go according to his understanding of it. You work so much, you get so much reward. You do so much effort, you get something. This is why having something good come to him really upset him too. This was not a part of his scheme of things.
You've seen many patterns of human life in which everything goes according to this neat little schedule?
I think this is one of the points out of the drama, that we simply cannot live with everything coming according to pattern or schedule, because it doesn't.
Do you think there's anything too wrong in expecting something for nothing once in a while? He mentions that he had this philosophy of life. You can never expect something for nothing.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that philosophy, because it seems to me that one of the joys of life is that occasionally we do get something for nothing, and quite often get things we do not deserve, and our attitude should be that of gratitude, because God, family, friends, society, circumstance, even the breaks, can frequently give us things we don't deserve. We ought to be grateful.
Were they not the result of bread cast upon the waters a long time ago?
They may be, but not always. There can come breaks that are good, which are not the result of bread cast upon the water.
He mentions when he's tossing the cards at the hat, this is something I can understand, this is something I can count on. What else can we have in the back of our minds that we can count on that would give us the same understanding that he found in this particular way?
We can count on God himself as creator and sustainer of the universe. We can count on the order that God has built into the universe. That is, the design and pattern and plan by which people live and by which things happen. We can count, not with the same certainty, upon ourselves and other people. Here's where the uncertainty begins to creep in, because we fail ourselves and other people fail us. But more or less we count on other people. And we can count on a lot of physical things which we have learned to control, like the tossing of the card.
Yes, but a person who, like you, Mr. Jones, believes this, that you can count on such realities as God, are not the kind of people who would find themselves in the kind of jam in which our friend there tossing cards in the hat was. How do you persuade the great number of people who haven't found the serious thing to count on that there is something more than the tossing of a card in the hat? Who does it? Have the churches done it? Are we doing it in seminaries? Are you who are teachers doing it?
We should be, and I think the problem comes at the point that we in the churches or the seminaries or the colleges or the homes have misinterpreted what the breaks are. Too often we have implied by saying to a child or to an adult, if you believe in God, everything will come out all right. Then, of course, when it doesn't, the person's faith is shattered. This is the problem that the religious person can have, just like the character in our drama, Mr. Adams. We set up a system in which God is head of it, therefore everything is all right. Mr. Adams had his rule of conduct, and therefore everything should be all right. And when it isn't, then his system crumbles, or we sometimes turn our backs on God.
Well, when you saw, for example, the real estate boss, Mr. Anderson, I guess his name was, say to him, well, it's the way the little ball bounces, though he really had a feeling, I thought, of regret that this unfairness had occurred. So did the mayor, or whoever the man was, at the town meeting. Do you think that if our Mr. Adams, the hero of the story, had thought back of the goodwill in a way that was generated in the minds of these men when they saw the unfairness, do you think this would have helped him?
This certainly could have helped, and this is one way to react to good breaks or bad breaks, to say when the bad breaks come, every cloud has its silver lining. This is a way of enabling us to live through it.
At least I made a friend sort of attitude.
Yes. Or another way to live through it is what Mr. Emery suggested a while ago, to say, well, the good breaks and the bad breaks will even out in the long run. They don't always, but this is one way of enabling us to live through the situation.
Do you find too many of us expect success just because we work hard? We noticed in one place he said, but why did this happen? I worked so hard. This is no guarantee of success, is it?
It certainly is not. Because of circumstance and other people and other events and involvements, we can work hard and deserve. This is the point of the main character in our drama, that we can deserve good things and not get them. We can get bad things when we didn't deserve them. And we would be more mature and able as persons as soon as we recognize that life does not go by such a cause and effect simple relationship.
And also, are we not measuring success, as we speak of it here, in terms of strictly temporal?
Yes.
Our way of life says that it is successful to make a lot of money or to become president of the United States or some other.
Or to cast it in specifically Christian terms, as we in the world measure success. Jesus of Nazareth was a failure.
Absolutely.
No money, no possessions.
There you are.
Convicted,
Yes.
crucified, and a horrible death. Yet as God measures success, this is the only totally real success the world has known.
Even his friends, his closest friends, didn't have the courage to say, I know this man. Now this must have been profoundly hurtful. How can you teach human beings that when this happens, and it happens to all of us, that a friend hasn't the courage or decides we were wrong and so forth, to face this and know that there is God's friendship, which will never fail us even though we don't see it? How do you teach this to people?
I would teach first through the example of Jesus himself, who, though he counted on friends and others, yet in the final crisis had nothing except his relationship to God to depend on.
But he was the Son of God, better than us.
Yes, and yet gave us a faith that ought to maintain and sustain and lead us, though not to such a great extent. Yet there's another lesson from his example I think we ought to remember. Though his friends betrayed him, yet he believed in them, was patient with them, and found the means of restoring their friendship. This is where we often fail in our being human. We give up too quickly.
Yes, we'll not forgive and give them another try.
The first time you turn your back on me, I give up and am true with you forever.
Yeah, and the man who really betrayed him, I think in a rather petty way, who was Peter, was the one he made the head of the whole thing.
In speaking of this relationship with God, we, of course, would have to include prayer. What happens and how do we approach the person that says, I've had these bad breaks, I've done everything, and I've even prayed for help and I don't seem to get it? Now where do we go and how do we answer this question that this person might ask, what do I do now?
I would say first that we need to remind this person of the way God has made the universe, and that God has set an order into it, and set a pattern in it, and has set certain laws that we must learn to adjust to. That is, we should not pray to God to do away with the law of gravity, for instance, as we're going down from the 10th story of a building. That we should say to this person that God hears prayers, but sometimes an answer no is just as much an answer as yes. That we have to trust in the wisdom of God being greater than ours, in his understanding being greater than ours. And we have also to recognize that God's ways of doing things are sometimes beyond us. This is part of this Easter story, I think, that in the midst of the crucifixion, here are people to say God failed us completely. Yet out of the crucifixion comes the resurrection and the Easter triumph. And all of this, I think, you have to say to a person, though it's difficult to say because they're such religious terms and so far from the ordinary lives most of us live.
Would you say that the best prayer then for people to try to learn about is a prayer that just asks God for the necessary strength with which to understand or accept or fulfill whatever comes, rather than ask for what we think would be the right thing?
The best prayer is thy will be done. Basically what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes. The strength to accept
the strength to accept, and the strength to know when we ought to be acting to change that which is around us. For life is not always a matter of acceptance.
No.
Sometimes acceptance, but it's sometimes setting out courageously to change that which ought to be changed.
A prayer for inspiration, therefore,
Surely.
to feel
Yes.
moved to do this. Isn't this a difficult thing to achieve in a society such as ours, in which the accent is so much on yourself as an individual? We must do for ourselves. This is our dignity. This is our...
And this is the basic point that I think maybe Mr. Adams in our drama overlooked. The point that no one of us lives in a vacuum. We're all a part of a larger scene. We're a part of a community. We're a part of a family. And as all of these persons interact and play upon each other in circumstance, things change and things happen. And we just cannot be separated.
Yes, and we therefore have to make this act of surrender, of this personal determination which we cultivate in all our temporal ways.
We seek to find ourselves before God as an individual. We seek to find ourselves in a...
This discussion isn't finished until you have thought through to your satisfaction the questions which Mr. Jones, Miss Sergio, and Mr. Emery have been considering. Perhaps you will want to continue to think and talk about the issues which Talkback is raising. Talkback is a public service program presented by this station and the churches of your community. It was produced in cooperation with the National Council of Churches as a contribution of the Methodist Television Ministry.